Pug-faced killer. Now, this happened quite a while ago, but it still sticks out in my mind as one of the creepiest encounters I have ever had. I'm a 5'4" decent-looking female who is a bit too plucky for her own good sometimes. At the time, I was driving an old Volvo grocery getter, nothing that provokes a second look from anyone, to be honest, even the cops. I pulled into a somewhat run-down shopping center to do a bit of poking around at a discount store. Two attractive young girls had just pulled in ahead of me in a red sports car and were getting out. I was taking my time, finishing my cigarette with the window open, when I saw a man exit a blue car and call it to them. "Hey, excuse me, girls," he said in a friendly voice. They kept walking. He called out again, a bit louder this time, and slowly walked towards them. "Sorry to bother you, but I think I just hit your car. Maybe we should exchange information." In my mind, I'm thinking, ew, what a loser. That is the lamest excuse I've ever heard, and I chuckled. I had seen them pull in the same time I did, and they were nowhere near this guy's car. At this point, the man walked into my view, and I got a quick look at him from my side mirror. He was a middle-aged man with a comb-over who just screamed, "Hi, everyone, I am a creeper." I laughed it off once again, until one of the girls stopped to speak with him. For some reason, I felt the need to intervene. I hopped out of my car and legged it towards them, passing him before he could get any closer. "Hey, guys!" I shouted and waved. One of the girls gave me a look as if I'd just grown a head out of my armpit. I gave them a quick sideways flick of my eyes, and that was a sudden understanding, which I was grateful for, as not playing along at that moment would have made things really awkward. Just then he approached me and stood to my right. "Oh, hey, Doris," the other girl said with a big grin. I could see his eyes darting around as if he was assessing his surroundings. The man spoke up again. "Hi there. I'm really sorry to bother you lovely girls, but I think you may have dinged your car while I pulled in." I turned to him with a huge shit-eating grin. I said, "No, you didn't. You're fine. I watched you pull in." I turned and pointed to the spot I saw him from originally, which again was nowhere near these girls. He looked put off for a moment, and a slight frown burrowed into his forehead. "Oh, okay, sorry to bother you." I smiled at him and said, "Thank you for checking, though. Have a good one." As the three of us quickly walked into the store, there was a collective feeling of relief once the door shut behind us, leaving him still standing there. We all nervously chatted for a bit, and I said with a smile, "Doris, really?" They both laughed. "Hey, that's my grandma's name," and laughed a bit harder. We informed the manager of the situation. To say he was less than helpful would be an understatement. One of the girls phoned the non-emergency police line, and they informed us that they would send a patrol. But the story doesn't end here. I left a short time after to head to the craft store. I noticed his car still parked in the same spot with him in it. I could see him in my peripheral vision, watching me from his rearview mirror. I just knew in my gut that this guy was no ordinary creeper. Instead of walking the somewhat long distance across the parking lot, I decided to drive my car and park it right in front, in between two very large pickups. I got what I needed, but couldn't shake the twisting knot in my stomach, so I decided that I needed a nice new set of X-Acto blades. I informed the cleric about the man in the blue car as I was checking out, and asked her to keep an eye on me as I got in my car. She agreed and said that she had complaints about him all day, and the police still had not arrived yet. Before leaving, I unwrapped the X-Acto and stuck it in my pocket, blade side down. The cleric didn't bat an eyelash. Being very aware of my surroundings, I quickly walked the short distance to my car. Sure as shit, there was a blue car parked opposite to mine. What made it even worse was that he had taken the extra effort to back in. This guy had followed me and was waiting for me. Oh shit, I'm thinking. And thinking fast, I opened my car door wide enough to put a barrier between myself and whatever this guy may have been thinking. Just as I was about to get in, the blue car's door opened and out he came. For some ungodly reason, I didn't want to run. I wanted to see what he was going to do. My inner voice was telling me to stay. Maybe if you can keep him here long enough, the cleric will call the police again with evidence that this guy is actually stalking women. I wedged my keys into my fists so the metal pointed out between my fingers and kept it to my side. In hindsight, I don't know if starting the car would have been a better idea, but alas, decisions were made. He stood up and walked to the front of his car and stopped. "Do I know you from somewhere?" My natural defenses kicked in, which is sarcasm, and I smirked. "Yeah, from the parking lot about 45 minutes ago." He didn't smile. He was deadpan. "No, I mean from somewhere else. I think we've met before." The look on his face, his whole demeanor had changed. He looked and he felt empty. No emotion at all. I suddenly felt like I wanted to vomit. I was scared, yet that damn inner voice kept telling me, "Just play the game, just play the game." I started taking mental notes. blue beat-up hatchback. I don't remember the make exactly, as it was many, many years ago. I do remember vividly what he looked like, though, as I noticed that I was staring at him with this wild look on my face. He looked like the poster child for every serial killer, rapist, kidnapper ever. I swear they all shop the same store and have only one outfit, goddammit. A white middle-aged man with a face like a shaved pug, dirty blue-gray jeans, work boots, a stained white t-shirt, black square-framed glasses, and a comb-over. It wasn't just a comb-over. His hair was sprayed on, as if that was the only form of hygiene this man knew about. Charming. He continued with his odd questions and attempts to get me to go to a bar with him. Just hop in. There's one right around the corner, he said. Still deadpan. No more of the fake attempted pleasantries or smiles. My alarm bells were ringing so loud they broke, and I had to buy new ones on eBay. The word note ran through my head in full stereo. He then proceeded to babble some garbage about how pretty I was, and he just a lonely guy traveling through town and would love my company. Before he could finish his last sentence, I blurted out, "Oh, do you have a puppy in your car too?" He went quiet, looked back and forth between his car and myself, looking confused. No. Do you?" I had to laugh. He was not amused. He took another step closer to my door, and that's when I had enough. I swear I watched too much television, and without thinking, I held up my opaque bag of goods from the craft store and said rather loudly, "You want to see my new X-Acto blades and hockey mask?" He took a slow step back and looked at me as I stood there with this insane grin on my face, turned to his car and said over his shoulder, "No, I don't think we've met. Sorry to bother you, ma'am." Smiled and got in. I jumped into my car so fast and locked the doors, grabbed a pen from the glove box and scribbled down his plate number and car model. I watched him drive away, just as the car pulled around. Typical. However, in their defense, the cop was pleased at the amount of details I provided, and then wagged his finger at me for putting myself in that situation. I can't blame him for it. After all, the questions were answered. I did go to the bar and have several stiff drinks. Later that night, I turned on the television and caught the last 2 seconds of a police sketch that looked quite similar to the man I encountered. Might be a coincidence, but then again, maybe not. So, shaved, pug-faced serial killer. Let's not meet. Again. My friend told me he was an alien from outer space. At my college, we have a gay straight alliance club, yeah. I know those clubs have a bad rap in the LGBT community for being just all straight people, but ours is pretty diverse, with basically no members being straight, and a lot of us are trans too. Anyways, there's this one guy in our club, let's call him K. Despite the title I gave, he's more of an acquaintance to me, but not really a friend. But anyways, he's very odd, to say the least. He's got some super complex beliefs that we live in a simulation and that aliens control it. More on this in a bit. He also thinks that he gets prophecies in his dream, and those dreams pretty much shape his entire belief system. I myself am a pagan, so I'm pretty open-minded to other belief systems. But this is a little too meta for me, you know? So I just always ignored him when he talked about his beliefs, because I just didn't want to discriminate. He added me on Facebook, and I accepted to be nice. He didn't really talk to me a lot, but one day, he was really chatty. We started talking about how I wish I could start an occult club at the college so I could meet other pagans and witches on campus. He went on to talk about beliefs he had from some close religions and passing them off as something everyone should believe in. I kindly put him down and said I wasn't of one of those religions, and since they're closed, I don't personally believe them, just what mine says. I didn't really even take it as a social justice standpoint at all, you know? I really just said yeah, I don't believe that because I'm not part of that religion. He went off his rocker at that. He started to say I was closed-minded, and he knows the truth, and that humans just build up ideas like organized religions to block each other from these truths. I don't like organized religion either, but I don't think my way is the truth at this point. I just kind of stopped talking to him, hoping he would get the idea that I am not interested. About an hour passes when I get this long block of text from him. He starts to say that he isn't who I think he is anymore, but an alien from outer space. And what he was saying was the truth, and that aliens don't talk to us because humans do not understand these truths. He, or this alien, starts to compliment himself by saying he's interesting and is totally right. and that I can ask him in person if I wanted to. What the fuck? Of course, I'm not believing him for one goddamn second. I just completely stopped talking to him now, and unfriended him on Facebook. I also reported him to one of our club advisors, and they are now keeping an eye on him and warned him about his behavior. Hopefully, the situation doesn't progress any further than that. Today at the college, I was talking about this to the other club advisor, and I found out he's in some special needs programs at our college, so that might explain why he's so odd. It's kind of hard to avoid him in person, since our college is a community college, so it is pretty small, but I'm hoping the professor involvement was enough to scare him away from me. Weird future phone call? Hi, I've been watching your videos for close to a year now, and I thought it was time to finally share one of my experiences. Now, I'm not very good with wording or typing stuff, so I'm sorry in advance. This is a story that happened to my family and I sometime back in November. So to start off, you'll need some background information on my family. My parents are divorced and I live with my mom. She is often working. Her work is 3 hours away and often stays with my grandparents, and is usually only home Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. I have an older brother and sister. My brother at the time was enlisting in the army and was quite excited about it. He lived with our grandparents about 3 hours away from our town for a job, which he later got fired from after failing ill for about a month. So he moved back home. Now then, on to the story. It was a Saturday night, and I was in the shower when my mom came back home. She told me for some unknown reason her work called her and said they don't need her tonight, so she decided to drive back home. My brother was acting a bit off that night, but we shrugged it off. My mom and I went to sleep in our shared room with my sister on the computer in the same room. At around 2 a.m. that night, I woke up to my mom in the kitchen talking frantically. I didn't think too much of it, as I thought she might be telling my sister something, who has a habit of staying up late, to go to bed. About 5 minutes later, I woke up to the hall light in my face, and my mom banging on my brother's door. For some reason, I still didn't think too much of it. I just thought my mom wasn't happy with his door being locked, and he is quite the heavy sleeper, so she might just be trying to wake him up. After some time of them continuing, I finally sat up and said, "How deaf can he be to not hear all this?" To which my mom replied that they don't think he was even in his room. I quickly got up and offered to go around in front to check his window. When I did, they were right. There was nothing inside. I went back inside and told them. My mom asked us to search his social media for any signs of him. I took to his Facebook and Instagram, and my sister checked his Snapchat. On his Snapchat, we found him posting photos and videos of him out with friends, and then an address to a party. We all quickly got into the car, and it was there my mom explained why they had gotten up. She had received a phone call from my grandmother, and fearing something happened to her sick grandfather, she quickly picked up. On the phone, my grandmother explained to us how she received a phone call from my brother. He sounded extremely drunk, and like he was on some hard drugs. He started speaking gibberish to her, telling her he loved her, and asking if she loved him back, saying how mom left for work and the girls, my sister and I, are in our room asleep, and he's going to lock the door and crawl out the window, how he has a new girlfriend now with a nice butt, and everything is going to be okay now, apologizing for no reason, and asking if he can live with her again. The entire time, she's asking where he is, where my sister and I are, if he's okay, and trying to get some information out of him. My aunt and uncle, who were visiting her at the time, were awake and listening into the phone call on the other phones in the house, as my brother kept telling her to go into a room alone so they could speak in private. She said it sounded like he started to cry, and he sounded like he was in trouble of some sorts. She told my brother to call her back in 5 minutes exact, and he agreed and they hung up, to which she quickly called my mother and informed her of everything. By this time, my sister is pissed, my mom is worried, and I'm the mix of it too, you know? Things were going through my head of how my brother could be drugged, being chased, overdosing, all sorts of things, and I'm growing profusely more worried as the time goes on. We reach the address and everything is quiet. No lights or anything, but you can see people looking out the windows, and there's cans on the lawn. My sister gets out and walks up to the door, where everyone greets her and basically says there's no party going on here. Yeah, right. Cause everyone just walks outside to greet a random stranger at 2 a.m. We tried to call my brother again, and he picked up on the second call. We started yelling at him to get his ass home, and he apologizes and agrees. We get home and find him sitting on the couch in the living room, scrolling through his phone. My sister at this point is fuming and just sits down at the table, having nothing to say to him. My mom and I walk into there, and she starts yelling at him, asking where he went. Why didn't he just let her know where he was going? Why he called Grandma up so late like an idiot? My brother looked at us with confusion. Now at this point, it's important to note that he seemed like a completely normal and sober him. His words were intact, he wasn't slurring or anything, and he just seemed himself. He asked what we were talking about. He never called up Grandma, and he had barely been on his phone most of the night, besides to post a couple of Snapchats. My sister and I automatically doubt him and tell my mom he's probably trying to just save his hide. He kept saying he didn't call her at all, and hasn't called her in months, and he hasn't much of a reason to anyways. He shows us his call logs, and sure enough, no call to or from our grandmother. There was only our calls from tonight on his log for the entire week. I say he could have just deleted them, and he insists he didn't even know they could be deleted. The sincerity on his face finally led my sister and I to believe him, and he asked why we even thought that. We told him what happened, and his face went completely pale, and asked if we're playing some kind of terrible joke on him. He's sorry he snuck out without telling us, and he's learned his lesson, and to knock it off, we informed him that we wouldn't get our entire mom's side of the family in this for a small amount of payback. At this point, all 12 of my aunts and uncles were messaging him asking if he's okay. He says he never ever called her up and swears on his grave he didn't drink or do drugs that night, and said he couldn't even if he wanted to, because he has a future to think about and doesn't want to ruin that. We sit in my living room, dead silence, as we have no idea what to think at this point. My grandma calls back, and after telling her everything is okay, my brother asks to speak to her. After she tells him everything, my uncle chimes in, saying how current him sounded nothing like the voice on the phone. The voice on the phone sounded drugged with an accent, and if the caller hadn't told them all this information, they wouldn't have even known it was him. After talking for a bit, they hung up and we just sat in silence. I started asking him if anyone had access to his phone at any point in this. He said no. He's had it in his pocket at all times of the night. And even if it wasn't, his friends wouldn't pull something like this, nor do they know our schedule like the caller described. I brought up the fact that the caller called and said that he had a girlfriend now with a nice butt. I asked him about this, and he went completely silent and got all flustered, asking once again if this was some elaborate prank. We insist it's not, and he says how he hasn't told anybody this, not even Alex, our cousin he's extremely close to, that he's been talking to this girl lately, and he actually went out and saw her before going to the party. We line up the calls with this information, and came up with that at the time of the phone call, he couldn't have been the one making this call due to being at the girl's house, and she backed it up. We started coming up with theories as to who it could have been. My mother thinks perhaps it was a stalker. My sister thinks it's some sort of phone call from the future. I think it's a ghost or some kind of stalker, and my brother thinks it could be anything. He insisted on sleeping in our room that night, as he was just too spooked to sleep in the living room. The next morning I tried joking with him about it, saying how, when he unlocks the door, to make sure to check under the bed, to which he turned pale and told me not to joke about it. We've had a lot of creepy things happen whilst in this house, and I might share some of them in the future, but this was definitely one of the weirdest. Thank you for taking the time to read this.